The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, High Stick NT, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Kelvin Hepner with Real Agriculture. We are at the Prairie Grains Conference in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and joined by Hans Kandel of NDSU. And Hans, you've been running a survey or a benchmarking study of soybean production here in North Dakota, looking at different factors and how it correlates with yield. Why don't you take us through some of the main findings that you've found so far, starting with the beginning of the year, row spacing, and some of those fundamentals?
So first of all, we have done a survey asking growers to give us the information. So it is based on what growers are telling us, and then we're compiling the data. So the things that we are interested in is, of course, planting date. So based on what the farmers are reporting us and the yield that they have received in their fields, we find that there's a very strong correlation between the planting date and the yield. So as you plant later, the yield tends to be lower. That's not something new. It is just confirming over the whole state that that is true. And so we recommend that farmers get in as early as they can. And of course, the soil needs to be in the right condition. The temperature needs to be in the right condition. But if you can get into the field by May, don't wait, get in and get as much planted as early as is possible. So the second point, of course, is the seeding rate. That is something that farmers can select. We also ask farmers not only what they are seeding, but what their targets are. And often farmers do not realize that there is quite a bit of difference between the number of seeds that you plant and that actually make it into a plant. But overall, we are seeing that the seeding rate of close to 160,000 seeds per acre in our study yielded the highest. But that actually then translate into probably a population of about 145,000 plants per acre, and that gave us the highest yield. So again, this data shows quite clearly that the seeding rate is one of the important components. And of course, the seeding rate and the planting spacing have a relationship. So there is a, depending on what kind of equipment farmers have, some grow on 30-inch, 22, 15, 14, or even with an air seeder 7 or 6 or 8. When you go to the 30-inch row spacing, that is way too wide for both North Dakota, Manitoba, and Northwest Minnesota. We are not using all the sunlight and translate it into yield. And therefore, we recommend that farmers are going to the narrower row spacings. 22, 14, 15 is kind of what comes out of the survey as where most farmers are optimizing their yields. Variety selection, of course, is a main issue. We feel that farmers are not always spending enough time to select varieties, so that is something comes out of the survey that farmers need to spend a little bit more time with. One of the big things that you can select for is iron chlorosis, and varieties have more or less tolerance to this issue. So if farmers select a variety that's more tolerant in those fields where they know they have an IDC, those yields are higher.
So are there certain points, maybe just a handful, where you see a discrepancy between what farmers are doing versus what is providing an optimal yield? Yeah, so I was surprised to see how many farmers were still growing in 30-inch row spacing. It was a large percentage, and based on the survey data, show that they don't get optimum yield. This also is confirmed with many of our research trials. If you go into the field in the summer, you will find that oftentimes with 30-inch row spacing, you can still see the ground really late in the season. So also from a weed management aspect, it would be better to have the canopy closing earlier. The other thing that I think farmers are not always aware of, that the seeding rate and the amount of plants that actually make it into a plant is quite a bit different. There can be 10-15% difference between that live seed that you put into the soil and actually plants in the beginning of the season, and then the difference of the plants that are established in the beginning and that are there still at the end of the season is another 9-10%. So I don't know that farmers always realize that it's a dynamic system that you need to get into the field with the right population in order to have the right population at the end at the harvest time.
Okay. Going back to row spacing, have you looked at differences between varieties in how they performed in the row spacing? Just bushy versus thin?
So in this particular survey we do ask the varieties, but we have not been able to see necessarily a trend. We just look at, in general, the row spacing, the narrow row spacing is out yielding the 30-inch row spacing. So I think that is regardless of what type of bean you have. The genetics of the bean, of course, is important. Some have more bushy beans, but also the yield potential is genetically determined. So we recommend that farmers are paying a lot of attention to the genetic potential of the beans.
So overall, you would recommend a shift, though, to narrower row spacing versus what a lot of people are doing right now?
Well, if you are growing a 30-inch, to me that is too wide for the northern climatic regions, and that includes Manitoba. So 22-inch is good, 15 would be the optimum. So depending on what the farmer has for equipment, if you have to buy a special piece of equipment, then maybe the economics per acre won't justify buying a second piece. But if you have the choice, then a narrow row spacing 15-inch would give you better plant establishment, a quicker canopy closure, and usually a higher yield.
And you plan to continue this benchmarking study?
Yeah, so we did the survey 2015, 2016 we are collecting right now. We intend to continue into 2017. We not only ask the farmer information, but we follow up about 100 fields in the summertime and do observations right in the field, looking at various factors and seeing what kind of limiting factors there might be.
All right. Thanks for your time, Hans.
You're welcome.